like to call this meeting to order. Thank you everyone for coming. Good evening, Council. Council, we just got back from FCM this weekend. We had a wonderful time. It was in the wonderful city of, or I should say the beautiful city of Quebec. And Quebec is just surrounded, or just in age and in history. As we were walking to the convention, several times I thought I was amazed and awed at walking past these 300 and 400 year old buildings. When I think of our own places here, right on Main Street, we own one of the oldest buildings in town, and it's 105 years old. And our home on Lumber Avenue is also a heritage building. I think I have this thing about plaques. So, and that is 90 years old. And I thought, I couldn't help but stop thinking that it was just a snapshot of time compared to what's the buildings in Quebec. And as we were walking, we walked through the Citadel, where the Plains of Abraham once were, and we heard about the 7-Year War, the War of 1759, where we heard about a young General Wolfe who was early 30s, somewhat inexperienced, waging war against a seasoned general in his 40s, General Montcalm. And there were big decisions ahead of them. And General Wolfe decided to attack at night. And he said he thought he could not get through over the wall, so he went through the embankment on the St. Lawrence side. That gave Montcalm a couple of quick decisions to make. He had to decide to either fight or wait for reinforcements. Well, he should have probably waited for reinforcements. He decided to fight. They ended up losing. We found out that both generals lost their lives. One was General Wolfe was shot in the heart, and General Montcalm was shot in the stomach, died later. But the British did defeat the French, and I couldn't help but think how different our country would look today if that war would have gone different, if that battle, because that battle was crucial, because Quebec was a crucial stronghold for Canada at that time. It was neat to walk on a promenade where the Plains of Abraham once were, and see the muzzle holes that were left by the soldiers. I just couldn't help but think we were walking on historic ground. And I was really amazed and proud that we had a little bit of Europe in Canada when we went into the other areas. Everywhere you walk was narrow streets, 3 stories high, right to the sidewalk, little sidewalks, and cobblestone roads. It just felt like I was in a different country. And it was really, really great to be there. One of the highlights is we got to hear from all the political leaders. And one thing that they did agree on, and they always have agreed on this, that we are the people, we are the government closest to the people. But this time, they seem to be a little bit more adamant with that, and they came up with a couple of really good strategies, and I just want to talk about one. Andrew Scheer, I thought, had a great strategy. We all know the Tories, they implemented the gas tax, and he promised once elected that he would implement more more grant benefits like that would be tied to something specific, but they would give municipalities a lot of options, because they would put the money in our hands. The money would be, these funds would be tied to inflation, so they would grow and they would be consistent, and it would be something we could count on. I really liked that, and I was very encouraged after hearing that, and I was very glad that they recognized us as the key player in government, as the key role. We are the government that gets things done. I'm really looking forward to our next government and what our role will look like with them. Another highlight, and this is always a highlight, is the networking we get to do. We get to have, they put 2,000 of us in a room, and we end up talking to each other, and we find out where you're from, and we talk about our challenges, and we get to see how other municipalities have beat things that we're facing right now. And that is huge. Another great thing, and I feel that as a council, in 5 days, that our team building has grown by about 2 years. I feel so much closer to all of you, and I feel I understand you better, and I think that we will work better as a team because we went to go out there. So that is my summary of FCM. Those are my highlights, and that's what I see. And council, thank you very much. I was very proud of you as you were going through and attending and learning and discussing and talking with other communities. And it was wonderful seeing you on the buses, mixing it up with everybody, and I'm looking forward to many more FCMs. Thank you. Okay, council, number 3, we have agenda in front of us. I need a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Damien Penner, second by Councillor Michael Swagstra. All those in favor? That is carried. With number 4, we have the minutes of May 21st, 2019, regular council meeting. It's on page 1. Council, we've all had a time to review. I would like to have a motion to approve. Councillor Jake Siemens, second by Councillor Damien Penner. Any comments? Anything further? Okay. Call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Okay, seeing none. We have no public hearing tonight, so we'll go directly. We have no reports or recommendations from the city manager, so we'll go directly to number 9, 9A, administration, the accounts payable. They're in the back of the book. Council, we've all had time to review. Looking for a motion to approve. Councillor Jake Siemens, second by Jake Hebert. Councillor Jake Hebert. Any comments? Okay. Call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. We have 9B, subdivision 4451, 2019, 8150. Mr. Workentine, could you please introduce this item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, this is application for subdivision file 451-2019-8150. This is for a property with civic address of 47 through 77 First Street in Steinbach. This file Council has seen before, but with respect to a rezoning application that was approved earlier this year. This subdivision is in connection with that rezoning application in which the developer has opted to consolidate the 6 existing lots into 2 equal sized lots for purposes of developing his multifamily project. Recommendation from administration is council approve the subdivision.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Workentine. Council, how would you like to proceed? Councillor Michael Swagstra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will move approval.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Damien Penner. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I speak on behalf of my entire side of council here today. I think it makes sense for us to proceed with the subdivision. It's pretty straightforward. We're consolidating these properties to 6 properties to create 2 equal multifamily lots. This is so that they will be able to meet the requirements of the residential medium zone density zone category, and this is a requirement of the municipal board. And so we, in order for this development to proceed, we have to make it possible for the applicant to move ahead with fulfilling those requirements.
Anything further, Councillor Penner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have already approved the rezoning of this. This is in one of our transitional zones, and this is the next step in the process to get this project moving forward. So that is why I support this motion.
Okay. Anything further of council? Anything in closing?
My side is done.
Okay. Okay, yes, Councillor Swagstra, your side rests. Thank you. As Councillor Swagstra and Councillor Penner both said, this is the next step. So, Council, the recommendation is for us to approve, so I will call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Number 10, council question period.
Mr. Mayor, would we like excuse the 2 councillors that aren't here today?
Good idea. Let's. I need a motion to excuse Councillor Susan.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. The motion is made. Second by Jake. No comments? Call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Okay,
Motion to excuse Councillor Hebert as well?
No, I think
we did both.
You did name them
We did
both?
both.
All right.
Just, yeah. Yeah. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, any other questions of council? Okay, seeing none, we will go on to number 11A, correspondence and petitions. That is the Epp Library minutes, March 21st, 2020, April 17th, 2020, and May 15th, 2020. That's starting on page 45 on your, in your package. We'll take that as information. And the, and 11B, we have the Seine-Rat River Conservation District minutes, April 16th and May 6th, 2019. If there's nothing further, we'll take that also as information. Okay, and we'll take, is there any other business? Well, it is not, no other business. Seeing none, it's not exactly 7:45, but if our delegation, Ed, is ready, I could gladly let you go a little earlier if you're ready to go.
Sure.
Okay, Ed, take the podium and your name, is that pronounced Kolodziej?
It's pronounced Kolodziej.
Kolodziej, okay. Kolodziej.
English is perfect. It's better or more unique this way, I suppose.
Kolodziej? Okay. Thank you for,
Oh, I know the topic of property assessment probably isn't top of mind when it's plus 26 outside on a sunny, warm summer evening, but I personally find property assessment pretty interesting, and what we're supposed to do is every 2 years, we're required by legislation to update the assessments province-wide, and that's why I'm here tonight. So for 2020, our assessments are being updated province-wide from April 1st, 2016 market values to April 1st, 2018 market values. And so within this report, we're reporting to council how the assessment basis changed in that 2-year period. And I'll give a little background in terms of how we've arrived at those numbers too. So now every day there's always properties that go up on the market that buy and sell in the marketplace. And in the last 2 years, so between April 1st, 2016 and April 1st, 2018, there were 949 properties that sold in the city of Steinbach. So that's a pretty active market. Now what we do with assessment is we go through a vetting process with those sales. So we investigate each sale and we try to determine if they are in fact market transactions, if someone's paid a market value, or if they've paid too much for a property, or if they underpaid for a property. And what we do is we remove our high outliers and our low outliers, and we arrive at what we deem to be true market transactions. So of those 949 properties that sold, we used 838 sales in our analysis to come up with assessments for the 6,051 properties located in the city of Steinbach. So roughly about 12 to 13% of all properties help determine the valuations for the entire community. Every 2 years, we do not go out and inspect every single property. It's simply an impossibility, but we do rely on the properties that sell, and that's how we arrive at our sales. And so what we do is we take those 838 sales, we break the city of Steinbach down into a number of different neighborhoods, so we're not comparing a commercial area to, say, a residential area and so on. And then we come up with this tax impact report. Now, often I like to report to council what are some of the highlights, some of the highest sales in the marketplace over the last couple of years. And I can report the highest residential sale in the city of Steinbach was for $900,000. That was for a single family home. And it has since sold again, and that new sale will be used in our next analysis. Our highest multifamily sale was for $3.2 million, so it was also pretty substantial as well. So it's good churn in the marketplace, good prices. Also, in addition to sales inspections, our department throughout the year inspects any new construction. So be it a new strip mall or a new apartment or a new home or a new garage, we come out and inspect those type of properties. And in the last 2 years, we've inspected 564 properties. Now, not everyone takes out a permit all the time. In a perfect world, everyone would be above board and take out permits when required, and that doesn't always happen. But as part of our ongoing inspection cycle, we have flown the city of Steinbach this spring. So what we're doing is desktop reviews over the course of the winter, where we will be updating assessments on the community of Steinbach, and that'll help us ensure that assessments are fair and equitable, and if people have done work without permits, say adding an addition or a substantial deck or something like that, we'll be able to adjust assessments accordingly as a result of those images that we've flown of the community. So that's something that we'll be working on through the winter as well. So. Okay, so if we flip over on to page 2 of the report, perhaps the biggest highlight of the report is on page 2, and this speaks to, first of all, the assessment base throughout the province of Manitoba, what's happening with property valuations, and then we specifically look at the city of Steinbach and how is that, and then we break it down by property class. So provincially, the assessment base in Manitoba has gone up about 7%. That's a pretty healthy increase. That's driven by 2 big components. Number one being the farm values across the province continue to climb at a rate above the rate of inflation. In some areas, far in excess of that 7%. And also the commercial assessment base in the city of Winnipeg increased, I believe, 20%. So that would have had an overall impact on that increase. Looking specifically at the city of Steinbach, the assessment base in Steinbach has increased by 3%, which compared to a number of the reports I've delivered, that's a pretty healthy increase. And what we do is we break that down by property class. So at the bottom of page 2 is a chart that reflects the various classes of property. So we have our single-family residential. Those are portioned at 45%. So what that means is for every $1 of assessment on a residential property, the property owner would pay taxes on 45% of that value. And the same would apply to apartment buildings and condos or co-ops. Farm property, people pay 26% of the assessed value, so that in terms of it has the lowest portion rate of the main property classes. The commercial component is at 65%. So that's the highest rates out there in terms of portioning. And institutional properties would also fall into that category. Pipelines are at 50%. And designated recreational, that's code for golf courses. And they're portioned at 10%. That's on the land portion. So if we look specifically at the single-family residential, the overall increase is about 1.2%. And as I've mentioned, that's pretty much typical increase throughout rural Manitoba, throughout communities similar to Steinbach. Where there is quite a bit of growth is with the apartment valuation. Apartments sell differently than single-family residential. Lots of emotion in the single-family residential. Oh, that house has a nice kitchen. That house it's located next to a great school. Those are big drivers with single-family. With apartments, it's driven on bottom line. What income is this property going to generate for me? And we continue to see compression of cap rates throughout Manitoba. And the average increase in valuation in that class is 10.5%. So that's a good sign. It's also an indication that the vacancy rates are low. As a matter of fact, I was reading a magazine a couple months ago that highlighted the real estate market in the city of Steinbach, and it spoke quite glowingly about that sector in the city of Steinbach, and that was in the Canadian Real Estate Wealth magazine. So it's good to hear from an independent third party, that type of opinion. The condo classification is up at about 2.8%, so pretty much in line with the typical residential improvement. The farm component of assessment is a very small portion of the assessment pie for the city of Steinbach, but it's witnessed the largest growth, and that's at almost 24%. It's quite a big increase. The commercial component's quite strong at 5.6%, and I've noted that the commercial assessment base for the city of Steinbach is 33.5%. That's a very strong commercial assessment base that helps keep the mill rate reasonable for single-family residential, for sure. And the institutional properties have seen a 5.2% increase, and the pipelines are up at 8.9%. And that's driven primarily by cost and regulation. Okay. Any questions on that page?
I have a question, if I could, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just, you mentioned that 33.5% of our assessment is commercial industrial, and that's very healthy compared to other communities. What would you say would be a more sort of typical in communities? So obviously, that would be a smaller percentage. What do you more commonly see?
Typically, rural residential municipality would typically be quite a bit lower. But if you're comparing, say, Steinbach to other like-sized communities, your Portage, La Prairie's, your Selkirks, etc., the component here is quite a bit higher than in other communities. Now, just for your information, this report that I'm presenting today is your report to do with as you wish. And our department is delivering these tax impacts reports across the province. In September, all of these reports will become public knowledge, and they will be available on our website. So you'll be able to compare yourselves to other similar communities and take a look at those numbers. So unfortunately, I can only speak in generalities at these meetings, but I can assure you that at 33.5%, that's quite strong.
Go ahead, Councillor Siemens.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The annexation that took place with the city of Steinbach, when we annexed the properties from the arm of Hanover, how does that role, what role does that play? So the farm and the rural doesn't play a big role today. Does that change the assessment for the farm communities that we have annexed to Steinbach? And does annexation already play a role?
It's already included in these numbers, and we let the sales tell us what's happening to those properties. So if we get a number of sales indicating values going up or down in any way, we would report that in the next reassessment report.
Yes, Councillor Green.
Mr. Mayor, through you. Just getting into the specifics of the numbers with regards to the city of Steinbach, the 33.5% being healthy for commercial. Would you attribute that to the overall community of our business community in Steinbach, or is it just a handful of really large businesses that we have in Steinbach?
In my opinion, the assessment base of the city is quite diversified. There's a good retail component. There's also a manufacturing component, so that's all in there. And it's, again, I think it speaks to the health of the economy in Steinbach.
Any other questions? Anything further?
I can speak to page 4 of our reports. And so often when we deliver these tax impacts, there are tax shifts that do occur. And what we do is we take your 2018 mill rates and we apply that to your 2019 budget, and we make a projection for 2020. And that's what's reflected in the chart on page 4. Now, those projections are somewhat optimistic in that the assumption is made that your budget requirements for 2020 are the same as they were for 2019, and that's not necessarily realistic. But if you wanted to prepare to know what the impact would be, the chart on page 4 would help explain that. Now, the chart on page 4 also includes the school taxes. And so it includes that in the projections. Whereas on page 5 of the report, we look specifically at the municipal tax, the municipal mill rate only. And that's the part that council can control. And what we see with this reassessment is a nominal tax shift, and that's partly driven by the uptick in farmland values surrounding the city, where there's a bit of a tax shift away from Steinbach, but it's quite nominal. There is one item that I would like to speak to on page 6 that would impact lower valued properties, and that's for this tax year, for the 2019 tax year. And you may get phone calls to your own residences over this. There's been a change in the way the education school tax credit is calculated on a property tax bill for this year. So what happens in the past is at this moment, the education school tax credit is a $700 credit that's applied to your total tax bill. To anyone that has paid less than $700 in school taxes, they will no longer be getting that credit applied to their municipal portion. So in a worst case scenario, let's say a person was paying $500 in school taxes on their property tax bill. That $200 left over, the credit will not be applied to their municipal portion. So that'll affect primarily your lower value single-family residential. I don't anticipate a large impact, but there may be some calls that come out your way as a result of that. Now, a couple other things I'd like to speak to is every year on this night or on this day, we've sent out 6,000 reassessment notices to the city of Steinbach, so to all the residents. So generally, that results in our phones getting lit up a bit for a couple of days with people calling, and rightfully so, questioning their assessment notices. And sometimes out of that, we get appeals that come out of that, and I'll speak to that a little bit. So when people, if people are calling council or the municipality and they're questioning the assessment, we would ask that you direct them to our office, and so we can address any concerns that they have with the assessment. Our job is to value a property. We would like to discuss that value with people if they have concerns with it. If they're calling about their taxation, that part of it we don't discuss generally because we're dealing with valuation, not taxation. People are not happy. We will try to deal with that. Absolutely, our mandate is to try to ensure that our assessments are fair and equitable. We're not perfect, and if we've made a mistake, we'll correct it. I can report that people do have the right to appeal, and in the city of Steinbach, the appeal deadline will be October the 7th, and our Board of Revision will be on October 22nd. We get very few appeals, and part of that I think is because we do our best to ensure that if there's concerns, we address with them as best as we can. But if people aren't happy, at the end of the day, they have that right to appeal. In 2018, out of 6,000 plus properties, we only had 19 appeals throughout this entire city of Steinbach. Now, just because a person files an appeal doesn't mean that they have to come to a hearing 2 weeks after the fact. We now have what's known as an owner-assessor agreement, where often we're able to arrive in an agreement with the property owner if they're happy with what we're proposing and we feel that that value is correct. We can sign an agreement with those individuals. And of those 19 appeals that we had 2 years ago, 9 of those residents signed owner-assessor agreements with us. So it's down to 10 appeals left. And of those 10, 2 people withdrew their appeals. So out of 6,000 plus properties, we only had 8 that actually had to come to a board of revision. So I think it's a fair process, and of those 8, 2 people received adjustments at the board of revision, and 6 did not. And that's, again, our job is to defend those values if we believe they're right, and if the board decides that the value is incorrect, those adjustments are made. So that speaks a little bit to that process as well. So that's our report. If you have any questions, I've passed out my business card. Please don't hesitate to call our office, and yeah. Thanks for the opportunity.
Further? Yes, through Mr. or Councillor Schweitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question. This is sort of one of those, it's a question that we ask every 2 years at this time, because looking at it from our angle here, the big question is, if the mill rate remained the same, is it a tax increase or a tax decrease net? I mean, because last time, 2 years ago, for the first time that I've been on council, by leaving it essentially as it was, on average, it was not a tax increase, because we were used to years before, there'd always be, you had to put it significantly down, or else most people were getting a tax increase. So I know that we're talking averages, and it's very tough to sort of, because some are going up and some are going down, but at a basic bottom line level, if the mill rate was the same, is that a tax increase, or is it a tax decrease net?
Net, it would be a tax increase on the municipal portion of 3.4%. And also, not included in the numbers are any new construction. So we still have, at this point, 111 inspections of new construction that we're working towards completing this year. So those numbers aren't included. So that may vary that amount slightly. But.
Yes, follow-up question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So now looking at all the categories, single-family residential, it looks like that one, that if the mill rate remained the same net, that would be a tax decrease. Am I reading that correctly?
So if the mill rate, all things considered, was to remain the same, there would be a slight tax increase.
Increase?
Yes.
So when I'm looking at because the change, the percent, I'm looking only at the municipal. I mean, the school,
yes.
the school portion, we have nothing to do with other than collecting it. The municipal is the only part.
Municipal, yes, you would see a slight decrease in the revenue generated, and that's reflected in.
And so one clarification follow-up. So when that 3.4% number you gave, looking only at the municipal in terms of the whole city, is that still the number, or would it be less than that because you're looking at? Because we're looking only at the municipal portion.
We at the bottom of page 5, we specifically we have the number there at 3.4%. So if the mill rate was to stay the same, you generate an additional 3.4% of revenue, but there would be certain classifications that would pay more. And in that case, the single-family residential would see a slight decrease in that case.
Can I ask one more follow-up? Sorry, it's in the same train of thought. So in that 3.4%, are you including the fact that you mentioned new construction? You're saying that's not part of that? Like
it's not included yet.
Yes, Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Just for a little more clarification, because I wasn't quite completely following. Single-family residential, we, on average, if everything stays the same, should be seeing a slight decrease, whereas the majority of the increase, the 3.4, would be attributed more towards the farm, commercial, institutional, correct?
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
I have a question. Again, another clarification. Is that jump, that increase across the board, is that because of the farmland due to our annexation? Because that has an increase of 19.8 on page 9.
That would be primarily market driven. Okay. So just the cost, the price of farmland being driven up. I believe the lands that were annexed into Steinbach were reflected in the 2018 roll already.
Okay, they were already reflected, okay. Yes, Councillor Stevens, yeah.
Just for clarification, single-family residential, since that's where we all live, large family residential homes versus the smaller ones. As our population ages, they're all downsizing. Of course, I'm looking at myself. We downsize into smaller units. Is there, does that have an effect on the values of large homes that, do you see any value changes in those, in that?
With this reassessment, we don't see a big tax shifting in that segment just yet. As I mentioned, that $900,000 sale price, the highest one in the market, has sold again. Post-reference, so we can't use it for our analysis, but the increase has been above inflation with that second sale on that property. So that's one example. But this, there hasn't been a discernible enough difference in the various, starter home to executive home to make a big difference at this point.
Anything further, Council? Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For coming and sharing this with us. And this will be valuable information as we go forward into study session and start building our budget for the next year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Council, that brings us to number 12, other business. Seeing none. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Penner, second by Councillor Hubert. Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Our next regular meeting will be Tuesday, June 18th, 2019 at 7:30 p.m. Thank you.